Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. President Trump attends the dignified transfer of 2 National Guard members killed in Syria. Actions he's taken since the attack. Beijing says China and Venezuela are strategic partners, showing its support for Caracas. It also says China opposes unilateral bullying. But under the country of the CCP, it has a record of doing exactly that. We discussed this with an analyst. Nick Reiner, the son of filmmaker Rob Reiner, makes his first court appearance in Los Angeles in connection with his parents' deaths. His arraignment has been delayed for early next year. The House of Representatives will vote on a health care plan. However, it does not include an extension of the expiring enhanced tax credits for Obamacare. How this impacts you? Former Special Counsel Jack Schmitt testifying today before the House Judiciary Committee. What we know about the closed-door meeting regarding his prosecutions of President Trump. Shen Performing Arts is officially launching its 2026 global tour with Europe as its first stop.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
New images just released to help police identify a person of interest in the deadly Brown University shooting. Police are asking for the public's help to identify and speak to this person who was in proximity of the person of interest. Earlier this week, police released security videos of the person of interest in all black with their face difficult to see. A gunman is accused of opening fire on a Brown University class over the weekend, killing 2 and hurting several others. Providence police also announced that there will be a press conference expected to start soon with an update on the investigation. And now to look at what public security measures are necessary this holiday season, we're bringing in Simon Hankinson, former Foreign Service officer at the State Department and senior research fellow in the Border Security and Immigration Center at the Heritage Foundation. So Simon, thank you for joining us today. Good afternoon to you. Can you just speak to us about what steps will law enforcement need to take to beef up security at large-scale gatherings this Hanukkah, Christmas, and New Year?
Well, it's going to vary tremendously by location. We've got 18,000 state, local, and tribal law enforcement agencies in the United States. Each one has different staffing, different equipment, different policies. They range from extremely sophisticated cities like New York, that's almost like a small country, has its own counterterrorism bureau, large police force, intelligence forces, and so on, right down to small towns with just a sheriff. So I would think that any city that's planning on organizing a large event is going to be talking to the Department of Homeland Security. They have an Office of State and Local Law Enforcement Cooperation. They have regular bulletins and advice and libraries of information and people who can liaise with local law enforcement. But it's obviously going to be a challenge for each individual region and city and town to figure out what they need to do based on the terrain and the particular circumstances of their area.
Are there any common key locations or events that will be priorities for additional security?
Well, I think after the vehicle ramming attacks that we've seen in Strasbourg at a Christmas market a couple of years ago, in Nice on Bastille Day, where over 100 people were killed in France, the stabbing attacks at Christmas markets. The French apparently have canceled their annual live fireworks on the Champs-Élysées, which used to get over 1 million people. You're seeing, and of course, Bondi Beach, the terrible shoot in Australia just a few days ago. Any open event is going to be riskier than it was, years ago, and that's just an unfortunate fact. So I think that there's going to be more concentration on the potential vulnerabilities. In Nice, for example, they put bollards up that would impede vehicles from going onto areas where it was pedestrianized. And there are various other measures that cities and towns can take to try to cut down the risk, but you really can't mitigate it 100%.
So I'm just wondering here, because large numbers of people travel over the holidays, are airports, train stations also places that may need additional security?
I don't think there's a single place where people gather that is free of risk. Airports tend to be pretty secure in the United States compared to train stations, compared to bus stations. I mean, if you go to Union Station in Washington, D.C., the level of security is higher than it was a few years ago, but it's certainly nothing like an airport. Anybody can wander in at any time, and they can get pretty close to a train, if not on it, without even showing any kind of identification or ticket. Airports are much more buttoned down, particularly after September 11th. But yeah, this is a monumental challenge. We're such a big country. There'll be a lot of people on the move, and everybody's going to have to really up their game in light of the violence that we've seen just in the past few days.
Can you also just talk to us what has changed in terms of the method of identifying and preventing potential threats or plots of attacks? How have those methods changed over the years?
Well, one huge innovation is the number of cameras that are in place. Now, you can look at that as a bad thing in terms of privacy, and I totally get that. But it's an inescapable fact that whenever there's an incident these days, there are multiple cameras, whether they're individual homeowners or businesses or city and states that have put them up. Facial recognition is an incredible tool now that didn't exist in 9/11, where you're able to, from a distance, take a picture of someone's face or a scan of someone's face and then match it up with other potential matches. So the equipment has gotten a lot better in terms of how to identify people. And you've noticed that buildings, look, I remember getting on a flight back in about 2000, late 90s. You didn't even have to show ID half the time. Clearly now you do. And you are searched within an inch of your life when you're getting on a plane. You're seeing more and more buildings. The middle school that my kids went to in Washington, D.C. did not have metal detectors when they went there 15 years ago, but now it does. And increasingly, spaces are adding that kind of protection to screen out people with potential weapons.
Yeah, I've seen that as well. Security measures have increased over the years. Simon, I just want to ask you one more thing before we end it here. Do you have any tips, perhaps, for members of the public, things they can do to ensure they feel safe during the holidays?
I guess the only real tip is to just be aware of where you are. If you see something weird, if something makes you feel uncomfortable, then maybe go somewhere else. I think it's really sad when people don't go out and celebrate and be with other people. I would hate to think of us all, hiding at home in fear. So I don't think people should not go out and not celebrate and not enjoy the company of other people. But you just have to be, hyper aware. Make sure you have a plan with your family to get in contact in case anything ever does happen. Just a routine that you go through of a way to make contact and account for everybody, and a plan for, particularly if you have children, to teach them what to do if something bad does happen so that they know who to go to and where to seek safety.
Well, all right, Simon, great analysis today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
The manhunt intensifies for the Brown University shooter. Authorities shared a new video timeline and a clearer image of the suspect. Yet, investigators did not indicate they had moved any closer to knowing the shooter's identity. Here's more.
As the manhunt for the gunman who killed 2 Brown University students stretched past 3 days, authorities once again asked members of the public for help to identify the suspect. In a news conference Tuesday, officials played several video clips taken from neighborhood cameras.
In this video that you just saw behind me, it all comes from the residential block of Waterman Avenue, Power, Ives, and Hope Street. And it's those residential areas that we're asking the public to look. If you have any camera systems or any Teslas, like I mentioned, that you look at that footage and that you can reach out to us and please provide us anything that you have.
Perez said the suspected gunman was in the area as early as 10:30 a.m. on Saturday, more than 5 hours before the attack, and that he was likely casing the scene.
There is no information that...
Officials said they were confident the person in the video is the gunman, but added they have zero evidence as to the motive for the shooting. Authorities initially detained another person of interest, a man in his 20s, early on Sunday. but they eventually released him after concluding that he was not involved. The news that there was no suspect in custody brought fresh anxiety to nearby residents, who have opened their doors to police officers seeking camera footage that might have captured the shooter. On Tuesday, many anxious students were departing the campus, including Parth Gupta.
I don't think anyone feels safe right now, given the fact that the person is still on the loose.
Brown said it had implemented enhanced security measures since the shooting, including doubling the University Department of Public Safety's staffing and restricting entry to campus buildings. It is one of the oldest and most prestigious universities in the United States.
Nick Reiner, the son of filmmaker Rob Reiner, appeared in court today for the first time since being accused of killing his parents. NTD's Christina Corona is live outside the courthouse. Christina, good to see you. What's the latest on his arraignment?
Good to see you, Don. Yes, so we're outside the Los Angeles Superior Courthouse where Nick Reiner made his first court appearance since being accused of killing his parents, Rob and Michelle Reiner. Now, his attorney, Alan Jackson, announced that his arraignment will be pushed back to early next year, citing there are very complex and serious issues associated with his case. Let's take a look.
We ask that during this process, you allow the system to move forward in the way that it was designed to move forward, not with a rush to judgment, not with jumping to conclusions, but with restraint and with dignity and with the respect that this system and this process deserves and that the family deserves. So with that, we are set for January 7th for an arraignment.
Now, this comes after his attorney announced that Nick Reiner wasn't yet medically cleared to attend court yesterday. Back to you, Don.
Also, Christina, I'm wondering if you can tell us what charges is he facing?
Yes, so yesterday, District Attorney Nathan Hochman announced that former charges were filed against Nick Reiner yesterday. Let's take a look.
These charges will be 2 counts of first-degree murder with the special circumstance of multiple murders. He also faces a special allegation that he personally used a dangerous and deadly weapon, that being a knife. These charges carry a maximum sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole or the death penalty.
Now, officials say that cases involving family members are really difficult to prosecute. Let's take a look.
Now, prosecuting these cases involving family members are some of the most challenging and most heart-wrenching cases that this office faces because of the intimate and often brutal nature of the crimes involved. Rob Reiner was a brilliant actor and director, an iconic force in our entertainment industry for decades.
Now, authorities say that Nick was living at home during the murders, but was not present when officers arrived. Back to you, Don.
Just one more thing here, and I'll let you go, Christina. Are there any new details that have come out about the events leading up to the murders?
Yes, so as we reported, the Reiners attended a holiday party on Saturday at Conan O'Brien's house, where Nick Reiner and his father, Rob Reiner, apparently got into a heated argument. Then, hours later, Nick Reiner checked into a Santa Monica hotel around 4 a.m. on Sunday. And by Sunday afternoon is when their daughter, Romy, unfortunately, she found her parents' bodies. And Nick Reiner was later arrested Sunday night near the USC area. Now, hotel staff have told investigators that in Reiner's room, they found the bathtub full of blood and blood on his mattress. Nick Reiner is currently being held at the Twin Towers jail facility in downtown Los Angeles. Back to you in the studio.
All right, Christina, thank you. Australian authorities have charged an accused gunman in the Bondi Beach massacre with 15 counts of murder and dozens of other offenses. It comes as funerals begin today for the victims of the anti-Semitic attack. Here are the details.
The 24-year-old accused in the terror attack on a Jewish crowd, Naveed Akram, has been formally charged after waking from a coma. Police say he faces 59 counts, including committing a terrorist act, 15 murders, 40 counts of wounding with intent to murder, and charges related to firearms, extremist symbols, and explosives.
We're currently awaiting his medical condition to be appropriate for us to do that. It's important that he has appropriate cognitive ability at the time. when you're on medication, we would argue for his fairness. We need to make sure that he's able to understand exactly what's happening.
Police shot him and his father, Sajid Akram, at the scene where his father died. Australia's federal police commissioner said authorities believe the shooting was a terrorist attack inspired by Islamic State. Meanwhile, hundreds of mourners gathered today for the first funeral of a victim, honoring a rabbi who organized the Hanukkah event where the attack unfolded.
After what happened, my biggest regret was, apart from, obviously, from the obvious, but from the things that I could have done more, is to tell Ellie more often how much we love him, how much I love him.
Those who knew him described Rabbi Eli as a pillar of the community.
He just wanted to bring light to this community. He was proudly Jewish. He just had a 5th child just weeks ago, and now his wife is a widow.
Australian leaders and the Jewish community say the Hanukkah celebration will return to Bondi Beach in defiance of the attackers' intentions.
Ellie lived and breathed this idea. We can never ever allow them not only to succeed, but any time that they try something, we become greater and stronger.
A Sydney shop owner is being hailed as a hero for disarming one of the gunmen, while a couple and another man who were killed confronting the attackers are also being remembered for trying to save others. Prime Minister Albanese identified the couple as Boris and Sophia Gunman. According to the Sydney Morning Herald, the couple were Russian Jewish. Boris was a retired mechanic, and Sophia worked for Australia Post. Albanese spoke to the media today, honoring the couple and another man who was killed while trying to stop the bloodshed.
Well, I pay tribute to Boris and Sophia Gunman, to Reuben Morrison, who threw bricks and took action to try and stop this occurring, also murdered by these terrorists. These are Australian heroes.
There has been reports
As the investigations unfold, Australia faces a political reckoning about anti-Semitism and whether police protections for Jews are enough for the threats they face.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. Billionaire investor Ray Dalio announced today that he and his wife Barbara will help fund the Trump administration's so-called Trump accounts. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent touted the Children's Investment Initiative.
Ray has joined what we are calling the 50-State Challenge. The 50-State Challenge is a special initiative Treasury is launching today to rally the nation's philanthropists around a common cause. Through the 50-State Challenge, we are inviting every philanthropist in every state across the country to partner with us in building generational wealth for America's children through Trump accounts. There are 4 ways Trump accounts will be funded. First, through an initial $1,000 seed from the government. Second, through the donations of parents, friends, and employers. Third, through the generous donations of wealthy Americans and philanthropic organizations. And fourth, through donations from state governments.
The Dalio investment amounts to a $250 contribution per child for approximately 300,000 children in their home state of Connecticut. Ray Dalio took to X posting, quote, "By providing children with savings accounts that compound over time, we are providing them with early insights into financial literacy and a path towards financial independence." Entrepreneur Michael Dell and his wife Susan have joined the effort as well with a $6.25 billion pledge backing the initiative. All U.S. children under 18 can have a Trump account. The House has passed a bill to restore whole milk to America's school nutrition programs. Joining us to discuss is Aaron Boxer, former special education teacher and CEO of Diversified Education Services. So Aaron, always great to speak with you. Thank you for joining us today. What problem is Congress trying to solve here by bringing whole milk back? Why was it removed in the first place?
Thanks. It's great to be here. I just want to say this is a necessary correction. Whole milk was removed from schools around 2012, and overall milk consumption among children, it dropped by roughly 30%, and food waste also increased. From a nutrition standpoint, that's a problem because policy only works if kids actually consume what's offered, and the science has evolved. there are multiple large reviews now that show a clear association between whole fat dairy and child obesity. And whole milk contains fat soluble vitamins, which I call KADE. That's vitamins K, A, D, and E. And that's for growth and brain development. So this bill doesn't force whole milk. It just restores some choices and brings policy closer to the current evidence.
So does this mean students will have more choice in school lunches? And that's a good thing in your opinion. So this bill is in a step in the right direction.
Absolutely, Don. That's what's most important here. The bill, it's not a mandate on whole milk. It allows it, and schools can offer whole milk, 2%, 1%, or skim. And then families decide what works best for their kids. There's the choice. We know from behavioral and also nutrition research that choice increases participation. And when participation goes up, then nutrition improves. A forced compliance just leads to waste. And choice within guardrails, that's how public health actually succeeds. So choice isn't anti-health. It's how you get the buy-in.
So what is the current situation regarding food programs right now? Are they effective or not in providing the necessary nutrition to kids?
Right now, because the science has evolved, we needed a little bit of change. And this is actually also good for the farming industry as well. But sticking with nutrition, it's about patterns, not single foods. And whole milk, it's not a magic fix, but demonizing it was definitely a mistake. It's very nutritious to have milk. Focus should be on reducing the added sugars. And I know that flavored milk is going to be in there. And I really would like to discourage people who are out there listening to this to add more unnecessary sugar. If there's chocolate milk there, I would just be recommending that they stick with the regular whole milks and the 2% and the skims. We need to prioritize more about whole foods and then build that metabolic health early. And that's where the science is pointing.
Okay, Aaron, maybe you can address some criticisms here about this situation. Some are saying this is catering to industry rather than a focus on giving students more choice.
You know, I do understand that there is some criticism here. But what's most important here is that we are really addressing what's best for kids. So if you frame those things, there is some conflict, but the science doesn't support it. The real question is whether whole milk, does it harm kids? And there's multiple systematic reviews that show no association between whole fat dairy and cardiometabolic risk in kids. If a food is safe, if it's nutrient dense and widely consumed, then supporting the farming industry is also helpful. It's a secondary benefit. But what does harm kids is policies that look good on paper, but then fail in practice. So after whole milk was removed, milk consumption dropped significantly, and food waste, as I mentioned before, it went up. And nutrition policy, again, has to work in the real world, not just in theory.
Okay, Aaron, let me ask you one last thing. So you were a teacher. So from your experience, have you seen any impact that food has had on a student's learning outcomes? Were there any differences in students' focus or behavior at all?
Absolutely. The nutrition science has changed. And in my conversations with people, not many know about what has changed. For decades, families were told to avoid fat and consume large amounts of carbohydrates. And that coincided with a dramatic increase in type 2 diabetes and metabolic disease. And we know that insulin resistance is caused by too much sugar and carb intake. That doesn't just affect the body, it affects the brain. And skipping ahead to the adults and later on in life, we know that Alzheimer's disease impacts hundreds of millions of people across the world. And many researchers have described Alzheimer's as type 3 diabetes. So it's really important that we get in with these kids early and teach them what is a healthy, balanced diet. Because over time, that buildup of sugar also builds up to plaque in the brain. So we want to keep kids with good diet and good sleep habits, and also prepare them for later on in life so they're not susceptible to all these diseases.
You know, Aaron, actually, I prefer whole milk personally over skimmed milk or 2% milk. That's just me. But thank you for coming on the show. Good to talk to you today. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. Good to talk with you too.
English doctors began a 5-day strike amid a rise in winter flu cases in the UK. They say they want a near 30% pay increase to make up for years of below-inflation raises. But the government says it has already increased doctors' pay to a lot and cannot afford to do so again. More on this from NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson.
What do we want? Pay restoration. How are we gonna get it?
Doctors in England began a 5-day strike on Wednesday, protesting over pay and working conditions during a surge in flu cases. The walkout is the latest in a series of strikes this year by resident or junior doctors, who make up nearly half the medical workforce and say their pay has been eroded over more than a decade.
So there are two issues. The first one is we have a jobs crisis. Doctors cannot find work and they're being turned away from jobs. And then you talk about pay. Pay is important. We must value our doctors in this country. They are seeing better offers elsewhere.
We are losing doctors abroad to better paid jobs and a better provision of health service in Australia, in New Zealand and Canada year on year. And if we don't solve it, we won't have the people we've trained in this country to treat our patients. We won't have them because they'll have been poached by other health services that recognise their value.
The British Medical Association, a union which represents resident doctors, is seeking a 29% increase this year. They say it will restore pay to 2008 levels once you account for the impact of inflation. The government says it cannot afford to increase pay more than it already has. British Health Secretary Wes Streeting called the strikes irresponsible and dangerous.
We did everything we could to avert these strikes and to stop strike action from taking place. When we came into government, we recognised what resident doctors were saying about pay, and that's why they received a 28.9% pay rise from this government. And of course, we're willing to talk to them about what we do in future years.
The industrial action adds pressure to an already stretched healthcare service. National Health Service England warned last week that hospitals were facing a worst-case scenario from a surge in cases of a virulent strain of flu. They said there may be fewer doctors on duty than usual during the strikes, requiring staff to prioritise life-saving care. Patients with less urgent conditions could face longer waits. Some appointments will be rescheduled. The NHS Confederation said the impact of the strikes is expected to continue into January and beyond. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News, UK.
Former Special Counsel Jack Smith is testifying today on Capitol Hill. The House Judiciary Committee is questioning the former Special Counsel behind closed doors. The committee said earlier the deposition relates to his 2 prosecutions of President Trump for his alleged mishandling of classified documents at his Mar-a-Lago resort and his challenging of the 2020 presidential election results. Smith ultimately dropped both cases after Trump won the 2024 election. In his opening statement, obtained in part by the Associated Press, Smith told lawmakers that investigators developed proof beyond a reasonable doubt in the election case, and that they had accrued powerful evidence in the classified documents case. Ahead of the hearing, Smith's lawyer told reporters that his client conducted the investigations based on the facts and based on the law and nothing more. Trump told reporters at the White House that he supported the idea of an open hearing, saying, quote, "I'd rather see him testify publicly. There's no way he can answer the questions." Smith has continually denied his work was politically motivated and has said he is willing to testify publicly. And meanwhile, the FCC is facing scrutiny for pressuring broadcasters to take ABC late-night talk show host Jimmy Kimmel off the air in September. Here's FCC Chair Brendan Carr in an exchange with Senator Amy Klobuchar of the Commerce Committee today.
But after Jimmy Kimmel's monologue, you went on a podcast and suggested that ABC should take Kimmel off the air, saying, "We can do this the easy way or the hard way." Those were your words. Do you think it is appropriate to use your position to threaten companies that broadcast political satire?
I think any licensee that operates on the public airwaves has a responsibility
to comply with the public interest standard, and that's been the case for decades.
I asked if you think it's appropriate for you to use your position to threaten companies. And this incident with Kimmel wasn't an isolated event. You've launched investigations into every major broadcast network except Fox. Is that correct?
I don't know if that's true or not. We do have investigations going on NPR and PBS. We have a number of investigations that are ongoing. I think if you step back over the years, I think the FCC has walked away from enforcing the public interest standard, and I don't think that's a good thing.
Now, back in September, Kimmel's show stirred controversy over comments he made about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Carr warned that local broadcasters who aired Kimmel could face fines or loss of licenses. ABC briefly suspended Kimmel's show following the warning. Senate Commerce Committee Chairman Ted Cruz criticized the FCC, calling it unconstitutional coercion that chills protected speech. Last month, Carr also said the FCC was opening a review of agreements between national networks and local broadcast stations. This was after President Trump criticized ABC. Carr and both FCC commissioners testified before the oversight hearing. Carr said his agency is working to drive down prices for consumers, restoring U.S. leadership in wireless, and countering national security threats. The Senate has passed the defense spending bill for fiscal year 2026. The vote was 77 to 20. The National Defense Authorization Act approves a record $900.6 billion for the Department of War. That's $8 billion more than what President Trump requested earlier this year. The bill is over 3,000 pages long. It covers a pay raise for troops, military assistance to Ukraine, and Pentagon's weapons programs. The House passed the bill with bipartisan support last week. The bill will now head to President Trump's desk for signing. Turning to Venezuela's coast, President Trump has ordered a naval blockade targeting sanctioned oil shipments. NTD's Daniel Monahan reports on that, plus updates on the National Guard members killed in Syria and a special presidential address to the nation.
President Trump announced the move yesterday on Truth Social, writing that Venezuela is now surrounded by what he called the largest armada ever assembled in the history of South America. Trump said the pressure will increase until what he described as stolen U.S. oil, land, and assets are returned. Trump has designated Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro's regime a foreign terrorist organization, accusing it of using stolen oil revenues to fund drug trafficking, human trafficking, murder, and kidnapping. Maduro denounced the American advances yesterday, saying, "Imperialism and the fascist right want to colonize Venezuela to take over its wealth of oil, gas, gold, among other minerals." Congressman Joaquin Castro called Trump's blockade an act of war. He said the House will vote tomorrow on a resolution pushing for an end to hostilities with Venezuela. The Maduro regime previously described the United States' recent seizing of a tanker filled with Venezuelan crude oil as international piracy. The White House said last week the U.S. was justified in taking the vessel.
We're not going to stand by and watch sanctioned vessels sail the seas with black market oil, the proceeds of which will fuel narco-terrorism of rogue and illegitimate regimes around the world.
Tensions are also extending to the skies. The FAA has issued an advisory warning airlines of deteriorating security conditions in Venezuelan airspace, citing heightened military activity.
The warning runs through February 19th, 2026. And Secretary of War Pete Hegseth said yesterday that the Pentagon will release to select lawmakers the full video of a September strike on a drug trafficking boat that killed survivors of an initial strike. Democrats have criticized the military strikes, especially the second one on September 2nd. They say it targeted shipwrecked survivors who otherwise would not have been able to conduct further operations. President Trump will also address the nation from the White House today.
He's going to talk a lot about the accomplishments over the past 11 months, all that he's done to bring our country back to greatness, and all he continues to plan to do to continue delivering for the American people over the next 3 years.
The president's remarks are scheduled for 9 p.m. Eastern and will be broadcast live on the White House's social media channels. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
President Trump designated Nicolas Maduro's regime as a foreign terrorist organization and ordered a blockade of oil tankers entering or leaving Venezuela. Joining us to discuss is Armen Kurdian, retired U.S. Navy captain and foreign policy and national security analyst. So Armin, good afternoon. Can I just ask you what kind of impact this will have on Venezuela's oil reserves, and what's the overall effect going to be on the country?
Good afternoon, Don. Are you talking about the blockade here?
The blockade, that's correct.
Okay. So there's quite a bit to unpack here. The terminology of blockade is essentially used to when you stop all ships going into and out of a country, whether it's dry cargo, wet cargo, oil, fishing trawlers, everything. So that's not a terminology I would use, because the term blockade actually under international law is generally recognized as an act of war. This is not that. This is essentially a call that says any sanctioned vessel traveling into and out of Venezuela will be intercepted, perhaps boarded and seized. So it's a bit of a distinction right there, and I think how this was communicated was not helpful. Now the question is going to be whether Venezuela is going to start escorting some of these ships outside of its waters. Their navy is not much to speak of, so they wouldn't be able to do it on a regular basis. If they did, then the amount of oil they'd be able to transport outside of the country or back into the country, or other kind of products, would be severely limited. A lot of these ships that are carrying this sanctioned oil are already sanctioned under international law. They're hard to insure. They're stateless in a lot of ways, and a lot of times they're not in the best conditions. So taking them off of the high seas is not necessarily a bad thing.
All right, understood. Can we also talk about labeling the regime as a terrorist organization? Does that provide any new tools for the administration?
You can label them as a terrorist organization, and yes, it does provide additional tools for the U.S. to handle that in terms of, like, perhaps a precursor to military strikes or other kinds of targeted attacks. I don't know whether necessarily labeling his government as a foreign terrorist organization it would really stand to scrutiny, and I think it's a little bit of an overreach. I think a lot of the interception of the work that's being done, taking out the little drug boats and the seizing of these tankers and additional sanctions on the country is probably necessary. Trump has talked about, this country stole a lot of American oil and our assets. He's going back and referring to, back in the 70s and also 2007, when the regimes basically nationalized a lot of U.S. assets, U.S. oil refineries in the country. The claims are anywhere from $10 billion to $60 billion of U.S. assets that were basically seized or nationalized by various regimes within Venezuela. The previous one being Hugo Chavez. So there is validity to that claim that Venezuela has taken some of our assets, and it might be a little bit of a stretch to say that it's a terror organization, but we certainly know that they are receiving under the table drug money, allowing a lot of these drugs flowing through Colombia to pass through their country into the United States and into Europe and the rest of the world.
Okay, on this subject, China is actually showing its support for Venezuela. It's saying that China and Venezuela are strategic partners. This is according to a Chinese Foreign Ministry statement. And just pointing it out that it's reported China is Venezuela's biggest oil buyer. So what is China's ultimate interest in this situation through this support?
Well, just like the Soviet Union tried back in the 1980s in Nicaragua and other parts of South America, China is trying to keep a foothold in the Western Hemisphere. And the fact that Venezuela and the U.S. are not getting along means that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and that's what China is trying to do right now. China needs oil, so they're going to be buying sanctioned oil at a discount. The question is whether the president will intercept any vessels carrying sanctioned oil from Venezuela to China. That remains to be seen. Certainly, China has been financing Iran's war with support of the Houthi rebels and other proxies in the Middle East through buying the sanctioned Iranian oil. So you see a lot of these countries that are just on the other side of the line. The ones that we talk about normally: Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran, and you can maybe now add Venezuela to that mix. Simply aligned because they don't have any ideological similarities, but they're all aligned because they don't like the United States.
You know what I find sort of hypocritical or ironic. According to that statement from China's foreign ministry, it also said that China opposes unilateral bullying. But under the country, the country under the CCP has a record of doing exactly that. Just think South China Sea or its actions towards Taiwan. So, what do you think about that? Your comments there?
Oh, absolutely. Look what they've done with the Spratly Islands going in with a lot of other countries who have claims to that territory. They've definitely tried to say the South China Sea belongs to them, which it does not. The U.S. only recognizes that 12 nautical mile limit. And to the U.S.'s perhaps discredit, I don't think we've necessarily stood as strongly with a lot of those countries in China's immediate regional sphere of influence as strongly as we should have. Now, obviously, those countries are over there. They got to live with China in their backyard, so they don't want to tick the Chinese off that much. But the fact that the U.S. hasn't stood up for them, that the U.S., the Obama administration, basically allowed China to militarize the Spratly Islands, which have a lot of natural resources, build artificial reefs and artificial runways and military bases in that area. It goes to say, well, is the U.S. going to be a reliable partner or a reliable ally in that part of the world? So in a lot of ways, we kind of have ourselves to blame for giving China a little bit more of a free hand or being less vocal, or less, not vocal, but less active in terms of our criticism and taking those actions to try to counter some of that, counterbalance some of their actions there.
Okay, Armin, there's another thing on my mind. I wanted to get your thoughts as well on the National Guard soldiers killed in Syria. President Trump said he's going to meet the plane carrying the bodies. The U.S. Central Command said this was a lone ISIS terrorist. How should we interpret that? I mean, what is ISIS's current operational capabilities in Syria?
No, ISIS is starting to recoup itself a little bit. They're nowhere near where they were, but there's still territory, parts of Syria and parts of Iraq where they are in control, and the government does not have control. I wouldn't necessarily call the new Syrian government as a strong U.S. ally, but they're certainly a lot less antipathetic towards the United States than the Assad regime. So they want to bring Syria back into the fold of the international community. I believe that Trump could have a massive foreign policy success if he's able to repeat with Syria, the Camp David Accord with Egypt in '78, and then the peace treaty that Israel had with Jordan in 1994. Because Syria is the one country right there on the border of Israel where they don't have a signed peace treaty following the wars in 1967 and 1973. Now, in terms of ISIS, I'm sure the Syrian government wants us there to help them, combat ISIS, keep intelligence on them, keep identifying what they're actually doing. On the other side of that coin, those troops, there's only 1,000 there. They're not really an offensive force. There's not much that they can do. So if there is any counter attacks, it would have to be from airstrikes or perhaps drone strikes as well, kinds of things. This what did sound like a lone wolf attack, an insider attack, which is very hard to defend from. And we saw a lot of those happen in Iraq. A 2-star Air Force general was killed in an insider attack as well. So I think that there does need to be a little bit of a closer scrutiny to determine whether those troops in that part of the world are serving a valid function, if they are providing requisite intelligence and supporting the Syrian regime and countering ISIS at the same time. But if that's true, then we need the European allies and other countries involved there as well.
Well, all right, Armin, that's all I had in mind today. Really great to talk to you, as always. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Don. Have a great day.
Nick Reiner, the son of filmmaker Rob Reiner, makes his first court appearance in Los Angeles in connection with his parents' deaths. His arraignment has been delayed for early next year. More news after this break.
Don't miss our special coverage of Turning Point's biggest event of the year, America Fest 2025.
This is the greatest nation on earth.
Thousands of students expected to attend the 4-day event, joined by some of the most influential voices in the conservative movement, all to honor Charlie Kirk and the principles he stood for. Watch our special coverage of the convention and our on-the-ground editions of NTD Evening News with Tiffany Meyer at 6 p.m. Eastern and Capitol Report with Steve Lance at 7. Turning Point USA, America Fest 2025, this Thursday through Sunday on NTD.
A performance that truly matters for each and every one of us. This is what you've been waiting for. See it at least once in your lifetime. Shen. Get tickets now at shenyun.com.
President Trump earlier today attended the dignified transfer of 2 National Guard members killed in Syria. The president was at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware for the solemn ritual. 2 Iowa National Guardsmen and a civilian interpreter were killed in Syria on Saturday. An attacker targeted a convoy of American and Syrian forces in a central Syrian town. The attacker was shot dead. The 2 guardsmen were identified as 25-year-old Sergeant Edgar Brian Torres Tovar and 29-year-old Sergeant William Nathaniel Howard. Syria described the attacker as a member of their security forces suspected of sympathizing with the Islamic State. Syrian authorities have so far arrested 5 people suspected of having links to the shooting. The Middle Eastern nation has been cooperating with a U.S.-led coalition against the Islamic State. Trump has said the U.S. will retaliate. The president also added 7 additional countries, including Syria, to its full travel ban list. Trump will be addressing the nation live from the White House tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern. We'll keep you updated on the latest. Today, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy detailed the nation's first advanced air mobility strategy. Duffy said the initiative will help ensure that the U.S. leads the world in next-generation aviation.
Broad concepts, modernizing our airspace so they can handle the increased traffic, building an all-new infrastructure like vertiports, bolstering safety, properly accounting for security concerns so our enemies can't take advantage of this technology and then use it against us, and developing a workforce of the future to support this new industry.
According to the Transportation Department, the strategy is centered around airspace infrastructure, security, community planning, and engagement, workforce as well, and automation. The action plan for the strategy outlines 40 recommendations. The department said it aims to advance research, stakeholder engagement, policy development, and technical development. It's been a busy day on Capitol Hill. Lawmakers in the House continuing their health care battle, setting up crucial votes with a complicated future in the Senate. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Eduardo Martinez, has more.
Now, just for the public knows, when there's a discharge petition and you get 218 votes, which is the majority of the House Democrats, then the bill comes to the floor. We want no obstacles. We want action.
4 Republicans signed on to House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries' discharge petition to force a vote on a bill that would extend for 3 years the COVID-era Obamacare healthcare subsidies.
Even some Republicans agree that action is urgent. All of the speaker's refusal to allow a vote on extending these subsidies idiotic and political malpractice as premiums are poised to rise.
I think these are obviously Republicans who are in swing districts that may be threatened in the midterm election. My prediction is with a sufficient number of Republicans signing on to this that it would pass the House. I don't think the fate in the Senate will be very good, however.
This is the second discharge petition that has been successful in forcing House Republican leadership to put a bill for a vote on the House floor. The other bill that was successful was the bill to release the Epstein files.
I have not lost control. Because there are many, look, we have the smallest majority in U.S. history. These are not normal times. There are processes and procedures in the House that are less frequently used when there are larger majorities and when you have the luxury of having 10 or 15 people who disagree on something.
Also today, the House Judiciary Committee deposed former special counsel Jack Schmitt. Republicans grilled Schmitt behind closed doors over the intercepted phone records of 8 Republican lawmakers and the questioned probable cause for the raid on Mar-a-Lago in 2022.
In today testifying before this committee, Jack is showing tremendous courage in light of the remarkable and unprecedented retribution campaign against him by this administration and this White House.
The House will vote later today on the Republican proposal to tackle health care. The bill would lower premiums and provide subsidies for low-income families for out-of-pocket health care expenses. The bill is expected to pass through the House but face opposition in the Senate. Also today, the Senate passed the 2026 National Defense Authorization Act, a $900 billion bill that is now heading to the president's desk for signing. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Several House Republicans broke with the House Speaker on Affordable Care Act subsidies and signed onto a Democratic petition. House Democrats needed 218 signatures on their discharge petition to force a vote. All House Democrats signed, along with 3 representatives from Pennsylvania: Brian Fitzpatrick, Robert Bresnahan, and Ryan McKenzie, and New York Representative Mike Lawler. Their signatures forced a vote on a 3-year extension of Obamacare subsidies that are set to expire for millions at the end of the year. The ACA funding bill is expected to expire since the House will unlikely vote on the extension until the second week of January. And this is due to timing on petitions like this and the upcoming 2-week holiday recess. The House of Representatives will vote on a health care plan that does not include an extension of the expiring enhanced tax credits for Obamacare. Joining us to discuss is Gerard Filitti, senior counsel at the Lawfare Project and political strategist. So Gerard, always great to see you. So a Kaiser Family Foundation October poll found that 8 in 10, nearly, Americans want to renew the tax credits. But, there's been a big concern about fraud on the Republican side. So your thoughts on the vote of a health care plan that does not include an extension?
I think the problem here is that you have 2 competing bills, one that wants to keep things going as they are without addressing the fraud and without providing a bridge or a transition to alternate ways to pay for healthcare, and the other one, which is what the House is putting out on its own, the House Republican Conference, is something that just basically cancels the credit. There has been no real compromise between Republicans and Democrats, but the problem is indeed that no one has addressed the fraud and abuse, which, as we have seen, is significant in government and is costing people the ability to actually get the care that they need, because this is making healthcare unaffordable and insurance premiums even higher.
So Gerard, I just want to point out some of the fraud that's happening here. Now, according to a Government Accountability Office report, it said there are gaps in identity verification that can lead to abuse. So for example, the office says it created dozens of fake identities to apply for subsidized healthcare, and all but one were actually successfully enrolled. So in your view, the problems that we're seeing here, are they systemic and fundamental, or is it more surface level and easily fixed?
The problems that we're seeing are very much systemic. It's a system that adds together a weak verification system with automatic eligibility. And what that means is that it's an open invitation to fraud and abuse. If all you have to do is provide a social security number, which may not even be accurate or yours, and you put down on the form that you are the right age or that you don't make enough money, you're automatically enrolled in a system. There is very little checking, very few checks and balances, very few audits that are conducted. And in most cases, you don't have to prove your identity beyond the number that you put down on a piece of paper. So this is an open invitation to fraud and abuse, and this is what we've seen happen in numerous states across the country, including in Minnesota.
So you said earlier there's competing ideas in Congress. I'm wondering, is it possible to continue these subsidies, but with reforms that reduces fraud significantly?
I think that is absolutely a possibility. The problem is that the Democrats have not wanted to budge from that position. When you're looking at verification or you're looking at increased audits, that becomes politically difficult, especially for Democrats to sell to their supporters. These are measures that usually Democrats do not favor. They want to make it easier for people to sign up, not harder. So this is something that prevents them from coming to meet in the middle and have that extension with increased checks, with increased accountability for fraud and abuse. So really, it's on the Democrats to sell to their constituents the need to have these verifications and audits and root out abuse in order to maintain the credits.
And you also pointed out the rising cost, right? What's driving up the cost? Is it fraud that's driving up the cost in Obamacare premiums?
Well, fraud certainly plays a large role. Every dollar that is being abused, that is being fraudulently wasted, is a dollar that's not going towards patient care. It's money that's going somewhere else. So those dollars are not available and are causing health costs to increase. But we also have, I think, a problem, a more systemic problem as well, with the inequity of the government and individuals to negotiate with healthcare providers on costs. We often see costs at an exorbitant, everyone is aware of this. You go to a hospital and you're charged $20 for an aspirin that would cost 5 cents if you went to a pharmacy. That's also part of the problem that no one is really addressing in these bills.
Your thoughts on having the government funds go directly to consumers or patients? What do you think about this idea?
Well, I think that's certainly an idea that has merit. It's something that's been kicked around for many, many years. Look, in retirement, when the United States government started allowing for people to contribute to their own retirement accounts, their own 401c, for their own 501c. I apologize. It's one of those days. When the government started giving tax benefits to Americans contributing to their retirement accounts, we saw a massive increase in savings that people were putting aside for their own retirements. They were no longer relying on the federal government for the brunt of their retirement accounts. We need a similar system in healthcare. If people can invest in their own health accounts, then that is a disincentive for them to spend money elsewhere, and it allows them to save for their expenses without becoming a burden on other taxpayers. That's the benefit of having individual health accounts.
Okay, Gerard, if you could you put this into perspective for us? Can you compare government-run programs like Obamacare to private health insurance plans?
Government-run programs have one benefit. It makes it easy for people to sign up because it's basically universal. Anyone can sign up. All you need is your social security number. The problem with these government plans is that in order to provide healthcare for everyone, you are necessarily diminishing the level of care that everyone is getting. You are not paying for the higher end or specialized care. You are providing a bare minimum for everyone to have equally. And that creates disparity in the market as well. So when you're looking at private plans, you're looking at choice. You're looking at people who have specialized or different needs being able to choose a plan that's tailored for their needs. When you're looking at Obamacare, when you're looking at Affordable Care Act, you are basically stuck in a position where you have to take what you're given. And that may not be enough for your needs, and you may still end up paying a fortune out of pocket for costs.
Okay, just one last thing, Gerard. You brought up choice. Is that the fundamental issue here? If you can just point to one thing that's causing fraud in these government programs, what would it be?
Well, if you're looking at the fraud in these programs, it's people taking advantage of the system. Much like with accident schemes where someone claims that they were hit and they have these medical expenses that were never incurred, it's the same type of idea where you are providing medical insurance to people who don't qualify for it, people who don't even exist, and that is creating the incentive for them to spend that money to go to fake practitioners or practitioners who are in on the scheme and bill for medical care that's never provided. So in many ways, this operates as a fraud on the system, and it takes money out of the system and puts it into people's pockets.
Okay, Gerard, good to speak with you. Thank you very much for your time.
A pleasure. Thank you as always.
Popular gaming platform Roblox is being sued over alleged sexual exploitation of children. Iowa's Attorney General is accusing the company of failing to take essential precautions to protect children. The lawsuit says Roblox engaged in deceptive trade practices by promising parents that the platform was safe for children with, quote, every precaution possible. The lawsuit claims the platform lacks necessary guardrails and has inappropriate content on its platform. The complaint also described Roblox as the perfect environment for predators and fraudsters, since anyone can sign up regardless of age and use the platform while being completely anonymous. Similar cases have been filed against Roblox in Kentucky, Texas, and Florida. In a statement to the Epoch Times, Roblox said, quote, "This lawsuit contains patently false claims about our platform. Roblox is built with safety at its core. We have advanced safeguards that monitor our platform for harmful content and communications." New York is set to be the latest state to legalize doctor-assisted suicide. Governor Kathy Hochul announced today that she will sign the controversial Medical Aid in Dying Act. The bill will allow terminally ill New Yorkers the right to end their lives with prescribed medication. Advocates say a dozen other states and Washington, D.C. have already legalized assisted suicide. The bill is opposed by many religious and disability rights activists. In an op-ed, Governor Hochul, who is a Catholic, wrote in part that she was taught that God is merciful and passionate, and so must we be, she says. Hochul also said there will be safeguards in place. This includes witnesses to signing the paperwork, approval from a consulting physician, and a mandatory waiting period for patients to change their mind. A spokesperson for the governor said she is expected to sign the bill into law next year. Russia welcomes that the U.S. is open for talks to end the Ukraine war, while hoping that European nations enter the dialogue as well. The Kremlin also says it does not want a temporary ceasefire during Christmas. NTD's international correspondent, Arian Pasdar, has the latest.
The United States continues working towards peace in Ukraine. U.S. officials have been negotiating with both Russia and Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin now saying he hopes Europe enters the talks as well.
The U.S. administration has demonstrated this willingness, and we are engaged in dialogue with them. I hope the same will happen with Europe, but it's unlikely with the current political elites.
Berlin recently hosted U.S., Ukrainian, and European officials for talks. But the German Chancellor now says diplomacy alone can't end the fighting in Ukraine.
Den sei in Erinnerung gerufen, was Präsident Putin.
Remember what President Putin said in response to my request to at least lay down arms over Christmas. Ladies and gentlemen, the response to this request could not have been more cynical and brutal.
The Chancellor made the comment on Wednesday after a spokesman for Putin commented on a possible Christmas ceasefire a day prior.
We don't want a truce that would give Ukraine a respite and prepare for the continuation of the war.
However, the spokesman says Russia does want to end the war in Ukraine, but Moscow wants to make a deal for a permanent end to the fighting, rather than a temporary ceasefire. Arian Pasdar, NTD News.
The Chinese Communist Party continues its trend of abusing the U.S. legal system as part of a so-called lawfare strategy to advance its interests. This time, the CCP is targeting Senator Eric Schmitt in a $50 billion lawsuit.
Yeah, we're getting it translated as we speak, but we do know it's 50 billion, and you know me as a troublemaker, but it's totally ridiculous. They're just mad that we exposed their lies and their deceit, but they unleashed COVID on the world. We sued them and we won, and so this is just sour grapes. They've sued me for 50 billion, but I won't be apologizing anytime soon, as you'd imagine.
The lawsuit was filed by authorities in Wuhan and Chinese research bodies. It accuses Schmitt and Missouri officials of damaging China's reputation through what it calls malicious litigation. Schmitt rejects the claims, calling the case baseless lawfare meant to distract from China's pandemic response. The move follows a U.S. court judgment earlier this year awarding Missouri $24 billion in its case against China. Shen Performing Arts is officially launching its 2026 global tour, with Europe as its first stop. One of the company's groups arrived in Paris, France yesterday. This year marks the 20th anniversary of Shen Yun's founding, making its opening performances in France especially noteworthy. Shen Yun's steadily growing popularity and consistently sold-out shows in France over the years reflect the strong appreciation European audiences have for the company. Let's take a look at this report from France.
On December 16th, artists from the Shen International Company arrived at Paris's Charles de Gaulle Airport, where they were warmly welcomed by fans cheering, "Welcome Shen." As this year marks Shen 20th anniversary, the artists expressed both excitement and anticipation.
I feel very honored and very excited to be part of the first show of the 20th year. And I'm just really, really eager to show the audience all our hard work that we put in this year and to show what we have for this year.
It does feel a little bit surreal because we spend half a year polishing, refining our performance, especially working with the other choreographers and the crew and the production. But as soon as that curtain opens up on the first show, it's like, wow, this is real. Like, this is the beginning of a new journey, a new 2026 Shen show.
Through classical Chinese dance and a unique blend of Eastern and Western music, Shen artists aim to share hope and traditional values with audiences worldwide.
The main message we want to show to the audience is one of hope and compassion. You know, it's like right now we're living in a very dark times. You know, a lot of hard stuff happening. But then we want to show people that there's still hope in this world, and maybe that hope is Shen.
Feeling that traditional values like truthfulness, compassion, tolerance, courage, dignity is still alive and relevant in the world today.
I think when you see this show, you know, you really see that there's a lot of hope. It's very uplifting. Not only is it reviving traditional culture, but it's demonstrating that when you do, you know, good things and follow, you know, an upright path, there are good outcomes to come from that. You know, so it's something very uplifting.
What we portray with Shen is a traditional Chinese culture, the real traditional Chinese culture, China before communism, and that is what the CCP is afraid of to have the world see, to see how wonderful and how knowledgeable and great the Chinese people were without this totalitarian government repressing them. A lot of people, I think, they really understand anything that the CCP is against is going to be good, is going to be worth watching. If they're willing to invest their time, energy, and money, this biggest government in the whole world right now, they're spending their time and effort to repress us, then that means we are definitely doing something very, very correct.
Over the years, Shen has been warmly embraced by mainstream audiences in France, with performances nearly always selling out. This year, box office results have once again reached new highs. According to the French presenter, performances in 9 cities are already completely sold out. By the end of January next year, all 99 performances across 15 French cities are expected to sell out. Due to overwhelming demand, ticket sales for Shen 2027 season in 10 cities have already opened in advance. On December 18th, Shen 2026 global tour will officially begin in Amityville, France, located in the heart of Europe, before traveling to 5 continents around the world.
London hotels are giving an English culinary tradition a Christmas twist this holiday season. Whether savory or sweet, local establishments are providing diners a little culinary cheer. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more on the menu.
The British are known for afternoon tea. At the Taj 51 in London's Buckingham Gate, the tradition is getting a festive touch. Manager Karina Luby says the 5-star hotel is offering something special this Christmas season.
We have actually been using literary for our themes for afternoon tea for some time already, and this year it's the Midsummer Night's Dream. We say it's in 5 acts.
The menu includes chocolate and cherry mousse with winter berries. Dill cream cheese and smoked salmon on spinach bread provide a savory bite. But Luby says there's still a classic touch.
So people can expect a very traditional afternoon tea, to be honest with you. Of course, the scones. We're very famous for our scones here. For many years we have been doing afternoon tea. Our company is originally from India.
Down the street from the Bank of England, a restaurant called Zhang is giving afternoon tea a Christmas twist. Pastry chef Lorena Tomasi said she tried to keep the menu fun but approachable.
For example, this is raspberry and pistachio, but also if it's simple,
is very nice. Hazelnut and hibiscus. So simple flavor, but combined with something of particularity. Like, for example, inside we find as well the cherry jam.
Meanwhile, in London's Mayfair neighborhood, the Chesterfield Hotel is offering a selection of sandwiches with its afternoon tea. Festive items include prawn and Mary Rose on a brioche bun, and turkey mayonnaise and cranberry on white bread. Deputy General Manager Joel Scott says the staff enjoy the Christmas touch.
We do an afternoon tea all year round, and normally it's our sweet shop afternoon tea. But from mid-November till the end of December, we run our Winter Wonderland afternoon tea. So it's a really exciting time because it gives the chefs some time to change up the menu, be creative, and the team really love it.
In addition to the Christmas theme, the Chesterfield still offers some of the staples.
We theme our traditional afternoon tea with a few classics. So we've still got the egg and cress, the scones, but we theme it with some traditional Christmas items such as the turkey sandwiches. We've got the chocolate Yule log. We've got the Ferrero Rocher macaroon, which are one of my favourites.
For locals and visitors alike, afternoon tea in London has something for everyone this holiday season. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Picture this, the heart of Manhattan, full of energy, movement, and life. Now imagine bringing that same vitality into your home with trusted health insights for your body, mind, and soul. Every week, Vital Signs dives into health issues that matter the most. The foods that strengthen your immune system, the exercises that keep you moving, the mindfulness practices that calm your mind, plus expert advice from doctors and health leaders you can trust. This isn't just another health show. It's real insight designed to keep you informed, inspired, and in motion. So whether you're starting your day with focus or winding down with balance, Vital Signs brings health and vitality straight into your living room.